If you have ever tried to organize or prioritize your different financial tasks and you felt really overwhelmed and confused about where you should start or what order you should do things in, you're not alone. And it's a common thing that happens when we try to get organized with money or we try to create some sort of personalized financial plan. I was recently reminded of how freaking overwhelming it can be when you have competing demands when I recently got back from several summer vacations. I got back into the office, and as I was looking at my overflowing inbox and my very blocked out and very full calendar, I could feel myself literally getting overwhelmed and struggling to figure out which task I needed to do first. What would happen was I would just feel the heat and the anxiety rising in my body and not actually do anything. Until I remembered this very free and very easy to use tool and implemented it. If you're new here, my name is Lindsay. I'm a certified financial therapist, licensed social worker, and I help people at the intersection of money and mental health. We are going to be talking about how to make a financial decision or how to prioritize your financial choices with a very free and very easy to use tool. This tool is called the Eisenhower Matrix. Reportedly, Eisenhower said something about urgency and importance. He said, quote, "I have two kinds of problems, the urgent and the important. The urgent are not important, and the important are never urgent." And out of this was born this idea of the Eisenhower Matrix, which is a fancy way of saying 4 different quadrants that we can use to determine what we need to do when we seemingly have a million tasks to do at once. The Eisenhower Matrix works is that there are essentially 2 lines. On the y-axis, you have a line pointing up that says things that are higher up are more important and things that are lower down are less important. On the x-axis, you have a line that if it's moving in this particular direction, this task is urgent. It has a due date or a deadline or it's time limited in some way. On the other end of that is going to be tasks that are not as urgent. And the way that we can use this quadrant system is to really think about if something falls into the quadrant of being both important and urgent, that's a task you should do right away. If it falls into the quadrant of being important but not urgent, we put into the do later quadrant, aka scheduling a time to do it. So this may be a task that you need to do this year, but it isn't urgent that you do it this week. So you might put it on your to-do list with a deadline of the end of the year. If something is urgent, but it's not super important, this is a type of task you can delegate or pass off to somebody else or ask that somebody else help you out with. Finally, the last quadrant is it's not important and it's not urgent, so why is it rolling around in your anxiety-ridden brain anyway? Full permission to delete things that fall into the quadrant of not being important and not being urgent. Some experts in the personal finance space really talk about how important an emergency fund is, and an emergency fund is absolutely important, but it can be really overwhelming when somebody says you need 3 to 6 months of an emergency fund, especially if I'm working with a client who only has a little bit of breathing room in their monthly budget and can only contribute $50 to $100 each month towards an emergency fund. So instead of saying, okay, you need 3 to 6 months of an emergency fund, I actually pull from recent economic analysis that specifically looked at low-income households. These researchers found they were specifically looking for how much money does a person who is financially stressed need to have access to in the event of an emergency. And the number they came up with was not 3 months of expenses, was not 6 months of expenses. It was $2,467. Yes, that's very specific. Feel free to round up to $2,500 or round down to $2,400 if that works better for your brain. What they say about this particular number is, quote, if you have less than this amount stored away, for example, you only have $500, your probability of near-term hardship is relatively high, and each additional dollar you save is associated with a much lower likelihood of hardship. The researchers also found that financial shortfalls, aka the amount of money that was needed in a financial pinch, was usually not 3 to 6 months of expenses. It was usually expenses under $2,500. For example, a $500 deductible when getting into a minor fender bender. Things that were outside of the norm of what a person might be buying on a month-to-month basis, but things that were not several thousands of dollars. That number in particular has been super helpful for me when I'm working with clients and they are saying, I want $30,000 saved up, or I want 8 months of an emergency fund. I'd love to be able to come back to data and say, look, if that feels good for you and that feels safe for you, we can absolutely work toward it. And the first benchmark should be about $2,500 because the research shows that in most cases, that $2,500 will be able to support you in the event of a financial emergency. Other common to-dos includes paying down high interest debt. I agree with this as well when we are talking about credit cards that have 18, 22, or 25% interest rate. It's really hard to climb out of that debt because the interest just keeps mounting. If you have any debt that is carrying 7% or more interest, it is important to start working on paying that down just because that interest can balloon so quickly. Other things to think about after you have an emergency fund, or maybe you want to save up for an emergency fund while you're saving up for something else, is the idea of a sinking fund. A sinking fund is the type of savings account that you can dip into as needed for one-off expenses that are not considered emergencies. For example, getting your oil changed. That might happen depending on how much you drive every 6 months or every 18 months. So it's not an emergency by any stretch of the imagination, but it is important for the maintenance and health of your vehicle to do that. So having a sinking fund where you put in a little bit of money every single month to use in the event of those occasional expenses is another layer of creating a financial safety net. You can also be thinking about other things to save up that would be considered short-term savings, things like a travel fund, a gift fund, different types of things like that that would be considered short-term savings goals, but might be a priority to you. Other things that people often tell you you need to be focusing on is investing in your retirement. And again, this is important, but you have to decide, is it urgent and important for me right now? And or can I do a little bit right now and then dial up the amount that I'm contributing each month as I get more financially stable? So those are just examples of why it might be hard to organize your thoughts and prioritize what you need to be doing when it comes to making money-related decisions. I'm going to go back to my example of when I got back from vacation, I had all of these different things that I had to do. One of the first things I did with my brain dump was also write down the dates that certain tasks were due. I had a few different presentations that I was going to be giving, and the organizers of each event had different deadlines for when those slide decks needed to be turned in. I used those different deadlines to help me organize what were the tasks I needed to do now and what were the tasks that I could schedule for later that week or even later that month. Just going through with those deadlines helped to dial down my anxiety because instead of seeing 12, 13, 14 tasks all clumped together, it suddenly was spaced out and I was able to go, okay, I have 3 tasks that are definitely I need to do this very week, 3 tasks for the next week, and so on and so forth. And it helped me to feel way less overwhelmed. When we are working on creating a healthy relationship with money, it often means we have to do different financial tasks. And depending on who we're listening to and what's important to us and what life stage we're in, we could be dealing with so many competing demands about what we need to be doing first. There are so many different rules about what you should do first, so I want to give you full permission to do what is best for you. So now back to that Eisenhower Matrix. I am the type of person who learns best with examples, so let me give you an example of a person who is in her early 30s and has several different competing priorities or decisions that she has to make around her finances, and they're all kind of rolling around in her head in this jumbled to-do list. These different items include saving up $2,467, resending a Venmo request to a friend for a house rental that she paid for that was around $300, finish paying off $137.50 on a credit card that has a very high interest rate, enrolling in a workplace retirement plan that requires she enroll by the end of the month in order to qualify for a 2% match, updating her resume with her new promotion title and responsibilities, and finally, renewing her annual gym membership where she can save 20% when she pays it in full. The first thing I would do with a person like this is have them take those tasks out of their head and then write them down. And then we would move into the Eisenhower Matrix and put every single task in a category. I like to start with what is the most urgent, what is the most important, aka the things that belong in that do now category. And this person says, there are a few things that come right to the top of my mind when I'm thinking about the things that are important and also urgent. One is that I need to sign up for that workplace retirement plan, especially because if I want to get that match, I have to do it by the end of the month. That is going to be one of my top priorities. The other priority is reminding my friend that they still owe me money for the house rental that I paid for, knowing that they and a couple other people were going to be paying me back. And as soon as I get that money back from my friend, it was about $300, I can go ahead and pay off that high interest credit card at $137 or so. Those are the three most important and urgent things, and those belong in that quadrant underneath the title, Do Now. Then I like to say, okay, now what? We can schedule it for later. It's very important, and also you don't have to do it this very second. They might say, I need to save up for an emergency. That's really important to me. And given the way my income is right now, I know I can't save all $2,400 this very second, but I can commit to auto transferring $150 from every single paycheck into a savings account earmarked for my emergency. So that kind of goes on my do later or schedule quadrant of the Eisenhower Matrix. What are things that this person can delegate? They might say, when it comes to updating my resume, it's honestly not my favorite thing. It's definitely something that I need to do, but somebody else can do it. And thankfully, I have a friend who is a resume whiz and weirdly is obsessed with optimizing for keywords and making sure it's structured. So I'm just going to send her my new title and job description and have her update my resume for me. And then when it comes to what to get rid of, the only thing left is that gym membership. And this person says, you know what, when I sit down and I look at that gym membership, even though I could save money by paying in full, I actually don't use it as much as I thought. And, it's not the end of the world. It turns out I really like working out at home, so I actually am just not going to renew that gym membership and I can take it off my to-do list. So that is an example of when somebody has 6 seemingly competing financial demands, how to prioritize what needs to be taken care of right now and what needs to be prioritized later. I absolutely love using this tool for workplace tasks, but especially for financial tasks. When we are hearing from all over the internet the importance of doing certain things financially, it can feel incredibly overwhelming and it can be really hard to know where to start. So by taking something like this free tool, like the Eisenhower Matrix, and customizing it, it can give us more agency and more ownership over the different financial tasks that actually matter to us, and we can prioritize them in alignment with our unique timeline and our unique needs. If you have used the Eisenhower Matrix before to help you make some decisions, please let me know down below. With that, I'll see you next time.